Record.
Yes. Got it.
Hey everyone, this is Brian here from Massey's Main Entertainment, and I'm back with my series, Was This Album Really That Good? Today I have a very special guest, which is it's gracious to have an assist on this, particularly for hip hop, because my usual suspects probably are not the hugest fans of hip hop. So I didn't want to put them through any type of situation where they would feel uneasy about it. I am joined by Mr. Trey Holmes from Reactions to the Classics. So say hi to everybody, Trey.
What's up, everybody? Great to be on here, man. I've known Brian for a number of years now. That he was a big supporter of Reactions to the Classics, and I know we are both big fans of hip hop. So he hit me up wanting to do the video today, and man, I'm really looking forward to it and excited to be here.
Thanks. All right, Trey and his dad Sean, they run Reactions to the Classics in their channel. Feature some great song reactions, song battles, top 10 countdowns, full album reviews. So definitely, scurry over there, check out their video. I'm going to put a link for that down below. But this week we're going with the good, and I'm kind of excited because I was such a huge hip hop fan in the 80s and especially in the late 80s and early 90s. What a decade, what a little 10-year span there for hip hop. And it was becoming, at this point, it was coming a little bit more than the music for the streets. It was becoming very popular in the mainstream. There were really kind of two camps that were really prominent at the time. There was pop rap, the Tone Locks and the Young MCs of the world. And then there was gangster rap, which of course is your Public Enemies and your NWAs, which were very huge at the time. But then along comes this record, and I'm talking about De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising. It was released in March of 1989. De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising became a shining example of progressive hip hop with music and sampling that's very powerful and engaging, and with lyrics that offer even an extra layer of engagement, if you will. Smart, educational, inspirational. The album went on to sell more than 1 million copies worldwide and was introduced into the Library of Congress as an album of aesthetically significance, importance, pretty much a no-brainer to me. The album recently became available on Spotify and other streaming platforms after a decade-long absence. So, Trey, I usually take the last words on this, but I am definitely interested in what you think about this album.
Yeah, Brian. Well, I listened to this record probably 2.5, 3 years ago, and hadn't revisited it since. I mean, I know you just noted that they're now on streaming platforms after a long, long battle, and I just think that's great that their music's just going to be obviously much more accessible right here. Because last time I listened to it, had to go through YouTube or whatever else, and it's just easier to queue up Apple Music or Spotify and be able to add songs to your playlist and all that good stuff. So my experience with De La is not not vast, and so going back to revisit it, man, was such a treat right here. And I think Brian too is somebody who likes a lot of current day hip hop and more alternative type hip hop stuff. Like, I could see so much of the influence on De La even all of these years later, and I can only imagine at the time whenever this released in the late 80s how innovative and creative it sounded, because shoot, man, it's still such a creative and impressive record musically, and and the lyrics and the rapping here are really, really impressive to me too. I think what strikes me on this is we start off kind of a little bit ballsy, right? We start off with the game show skit, and so I think immediately even if you're not a fan of the skit or whatever, I like the skits, but I think you're intrigued. You're like, okay, this is a little bit different, right? Where are we going here? And then we go right into 3 is the magic number, which samples like Schoolhouse Rock, which again, not something that you pinpoint being like, oh, I bet Schoolhouse Rock's going to be sampled on a hip hop record right there. And so I think just right away you're kind of thrown and thrust into what De La has to offer, and Paz's voice is just really calm and to the point. And then you have Trugoy's voice, opposite of him, and they play off each other really well, I think, throughout the entire record. Along with Mace's production, and they're just a great trio, one of the great hip hop trios I think there has ever been. Some of the samples in here too, just get down to really funky and soul-like. Ghetto Thing is one of those that has that James Brown like funky type beat, and I'm a big James Brown fan, so I am a big fan of that one. I Know is another one that I just have to talk about and highlight. I think it's a hip hop classic that's it still sounds so fresh today, and again shows the wide breadth of inspiration that De La had. They sample Steely Dan's Peg on this tune here, and again it's just so catchy, and again just the freshness of this album even all this time later really impressed me, because I don't know, Brian, for a lot of 80s hip hop, like sometimes I'll go back to it and I'll be more impressed with maybe the rapping ability of like a Rakim or KRS-One, whereas some of the beats maybe didn't age as well, just because, hey man, hip hop's still in its infancy here. But this whole entire record, man, just sounded in so well and popped and was just great. Another one of my favorites, Tread Water. A lot of positivity here. You highlighted, Brian, too, gangster rap at the time with, the hard hitting, kind of Chuck D, Public Enemy type of stuff to, NWA and, Ice-T over on the West Coast. And even in the South, you have the Ghetto Boys. So, a lot of a hardcore type of imagery and lyrics here, whereas De La kind of takes a left turn from that, right? They, kind of had that, we're put into almost like a hippie type of a mold that I was reading at the time, right? Just something so different, and I think the fact that they're authentically themselves works in their favor to a great way. And Tread Water is good addition advice, speaking as like animals in each verse. I thought that was cool. You have Say No Go, tackles drug use in a powerful manner, again with that classy funky beat. Plug Tunin' was their first single, and right out of the gate shows how creative they were, and again authentically themselves. And then of course we have I'd say their most famous track on here, or one of their most, Me, Myself, and I, which, Brian, as soon as you hear those first drum beats, those first seconds, it's just so recognizable. One of those songs, man, you hear the first 2 seconds, you're like, that's Me, Myself, and I, and now I'm locked in. I got to listen to the whole song, right? And so that's my favorite of the album. And again, I think just highlights how impressive it is that they were able to mesh together like so many different types of samples. I was, following along with the lyrics on Genius, and going down to the credits and just seeing all the different stuff that they sampled from. So man, just a really incredible album. And you had a couple guest features on here, not a lot, but Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest is on here. I was researching that De La's part of the they were called like the Native Tongues with Jungle Brothers and Tribe Called Quest. I think that that's kind of cool too, whenever you have groups almost as a collective together, so to speak, and kind of thinking the same ways, having the same types of sounds. And Tribe, again, another group with Low End Theory and Midnight Marauders that's it's kind of in this type of vein too, kind of a alternative hip hop. And I think hip hop today owes a big debt to De La Soul and to 3 Feet High and Rising in particular. And so yeah, man, this album it's incredible. It really was that good, Brian.
Yeah. What do you got for a score? What do you think?
I'm going, like when I initially listened to this album years ago, I only had it around like a 7.25. And so now coming back to it, man, I was like, I definitely underrated that. I'm going a strong 8.75 for me on this record right here. And again, I could just listen to the instrumentals, Brian, and be happy. But then you throw on the great rapping and, storytelling and topics that we have on top of this. It's an easy listen to. It's it's around an hour long. Doesn't seem like it though, to me at least. So I think it's just an exceptional record.
Yeah, it doesn't feel an hour. I mean, I've listened to albums that were only 34 minutes and it felt an hour long, but I've
Yeah.
depending. And sometimes, you know how it was in the early 90s and late 90s, a lot of filler in a lot of the hip hop albums where they were going just for more is more, that type of motif.
Oh,
Or,
100%.
2 hour rap album and only about 45 minutes worth of good stuff. But
Yeah.
a lot of that. My thought was when I was listening to it again this weekend, I said, it's very, and I couldn't come up with another word until I thought about it a little bit more introspectively. I was like, it's very Shakespearean, this album,
I
because
like that.
I like I'm a huge sampling guy, and I like the sampling. And there's actual moments when there's samples layered upon samples
Hmm.
where they're interwoven actually to where they would fit well if they were part of that song or the original song.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's so cool. So it's like you have that play within the play type of mentality going on with the sampling. And I thought it was so good. And you're right, not most hip hop back then, and there were a few exceptions here and there. I mean, it takes a nation of millions to hold us back was getting a
Hmm.
little bit and into the sampling a little bit, but for the most part, it was whatever you could make on a drumulator or 808 at the time. It's all the music you got for some of the early hip hop, so it doesn't
Hmm.
stand the test of time. And so, but the sampling in this album takes everything to another level. I think
Oh, yeah.
1989, the two good things that happened for rap music was this album and Paul's Boutique, because just from a
Hmm.
sampling
Yeah.
standpoint, those two albums are in my top four of
Hmm.
all time. The other two
Oh,
being
great
probably
shout. Yeah.
probably Introducing by DJ Shadow and
Hmm.
maybe The College Dropout
Yeah.
by Kanye would be in my top four for sure. And and speaking on that, I think that this builds not only to A Tribe Called Quest and Guru and his Jazzmatazz albums that he
Mhm.
released, which mixed a lot of jazz rap and progressive rap and things like that. It also like carried over into someone like Kanye. When Kanye does his
Mhm.
little chipmunk soul thing, he's
Yeah.
taking the idea of using these old R&B songs and stuff, or these old 70s rock stuff, and mixing it into their music. He just speeds it up a little
Mhm.
bit, and they call it chipmunk soul. So I think it's just that one step that they added to something else that somebody else did, and then
Yeah.
eventually you get to where we're at today.
Yeah.
Some of the tracks that stood out to me, of course, my favorite track on here is "Say No Go." It has
Mhm.
a great sample from Hall and Oates on there. Also, the Detroit Emeralds have a little bit in there as well. Obviously, George Clinton's on "Me, Myself, and I" kind of
Mhm.
stands right out immediately. You immediately go, "Ah, look, Parliament Funkadelic, got it."
Yeah, exactly.
You're automatically on board. Magic Number, of course, it got the sample of both James Brown and Johnny Cash is, "High Hall is the Water, Father," and
Well, and as you're talking about that, Brian, just like think of the breadth of and the wide variety of samples just from what you said. Hall and Oates, Johnny Cash,
right,
Parliament
this
Funkadelic,
yeah,
James
this stuff
Brown,
you would
like
never think a hip hop album would think about
yeah.
touching. I'm not touching that. And then Potholes in My Lawn has the War sample, I think is really good. And you mentioned I Know, has Otis Redding and of course Steely Dan. I
Yeah.
think honestly, if I had to guess, I know that the reason that they were held up from Spotify for so long was the trying to get the licensing exact, because they did not want to leave off tracks. In other words, they didn't
Yeah.
want to put it out there and then some artists sue them and they have to take those tracks off the album. They wanted all that stuff to be settled so they could get the whole album out there.
Mhm.
If I had to point to somebody that would hold it up the longest, I would think it would be someone like Steely Dan.
Oh, 100%. I'm with you.
Yeah, I think Donald Fagen, it's not beyond him and Walter Becker to like get really particular about someone using their music. I get that. I mean, I point it right at them going, yeah, I guarantee it's Steely Dan that was holding that up. But for me, I mean, even after the second listen, the first time I listened to this album, probably 3 years ago, that since the '80s anyway, I had
Mhm.
it like at about an 8.25. I also have it at an 8.75 this time
Yeah.
around, so it improved a little bit for me. But still, it is so good that it's one of those albums that I have to point to if somebody wants great example of good sampling for hip
Oh,
hop
yeah.
music. Go right to that album right there, and that's just a shining example. So Yeah.
No, 100%, Brian. Yeah, I think it is the definition, right, of a hip hop classic. That word gets thrown around a lot, but
Yeah.
this is a case too, and one of the better hip hop debuts of all time.
Yeah. I have to absolutely agree. And I've listened to a lot of their other stuff now. De La Soul is
Mhm.
Dead, which I think is equally as, it's equally as good. Not quite. I'm not going to give
Yeah,
it that quite measure because I always debuts. I will always wait a little
yeah.
higher than the second one, because I feel like you got more money to play with when you start
Oh
making
yeah,
more
that's
albums.
right.
The big record companies start giving you more money when they see they can make something out of you. So, but they did a great job. So I think the consensus is this is still a hip hop classic,
Oh
every
yeah.
bit as good, now as it was then. And I really appreciate you joining me. Hopefully, this is something we can get come back to from time to time. And
Yeah.
I think there's a couple albums that we've discussed that we really would like to touch for hip hop. I think Nas is definitely one of them. I'd love to dissect College Dropout with you sometime and
Oh yeah, that'd
run
be
that by
great,
there.
Brian.
So.
No,
Um,
100%, 100%, man. This was really, really fun, and I'm excited to hear others' thoughts on De La Soul and this record as well.
Yeah. So everybody, please leave comments down below. Sub if you'd like to. Hit that like button for sure. I really would appreciate any help you get. And thanks for joining Trey and I on this hip hop journey this week. So everyone, take care out there. Talk to you later. Bye bye.